We are here with new episode. Happy Days was one of the most beloved TV shows of its time, but behind the laughter and success, there were hidden struggles and controversies that many people never knew about. While the show became a comforting escape for audiences, its cast faced real-life hardships that were far from the happy image they portrayed on screen. During the 1970s, America was dealing with difficult times. The Vietnam War had left the country divided, and the Watergate scandal had shaken people's trust in the government. Many Americans longed for the past, a time that felt simpler and more wholesome. Television producer Gary Marshall saw this as an opportunity. He wanted to create a show that would remind people of the warmth and innocence of the 1950s. His first attempt was a pilot called New Family in Town in 1971, but networks rejected it. However, in 1972, ABC aired it as part of their anthology series Love, American Style. The episode was titled Love and the Happy Day, later renamed Love and the Happy Days in syndication. At first, the show didn't seem like it would go anywhere. However, Marshall believed in the idea and was determined to bring it to life as a full series. He set the story in 1950s Milwaukee, focusing on the life of an average American teenager, his family, and his friends. To make it feel authentic, the production team carefully recreated the time period. They used vintage cars, old jukeboxes, and clothing styles from the era. The show was also filmed in front of a live studio audience, which gave it an energetic, theater-like feel. When Happy Days finally premiered on January 15, 1974, audiences were ready for it. The show was wholesome, funny, and nostalgic, exactly what people needed during that time. Initially, the story centered around Richie Cunningham, played by Ron Howard. He was a typical teenager, navigating friendships, family, and high school life. However, as the series progressed, one character unexpectedly stole the spotlight: Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli. Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, became a cultural icon. With his leather jacket, motorcycle, and effortless cool, he quickly became the most popular character on the show. His famous catchphrases, like "I" and his signature thumbs up, made him unforgettable. But none of this would have been possible without the success of American Graffiti, a 1973 film directed by George Lucas. The movie, which celebrated teenage life in the early 1960s, starred Ron Howard and became a massive hit. It earned over $200 million on a small budget of just $777,000, proving that audiences loved stories about mid-20th century America. Seeing this success, ABC executives realized they had something similar with Marshall's pilot and finally gave Happy Days the green light. From the moment Happy Days aired, it wasn't just another sitcom, it was a nostalgic journey back to the 1950s. The show instantly became a classic, and a big part of that success was due to its talented cast. Each actor brought something special, making the series more than just a simple family comedy. Ron Howard was already well known before playing Richie Cunningham. Audiences recognized him as Opie from The Andy Griffith Show, but as he grew older, he wanted to move beyond his child star image. Richie was the perfect role for him, an all-American teenager trying to find his place in the world. To make his performance feel authentic, Howard studied old yearbooks and watched classic 1950s shows like Father Knows Best. Interestingly, Happy Days didn't come out of nowhere. It had originally started as a segment on Love, American Style in 1972, where Howard played Richie in a one-off episode. That role helped him secure his spot when ABC decided to expand the idea into a full series. Although Richie was the heart of the show, Fonzie was its soul. Surprisingly, Henry Winkler wasn't the first choice for the role. When he auditioned in 1973, he was relatively unknown, but he made a lasting impression. Instead of simply reading the lines, he gave the character a calm, cool attitude and even tossed his script in the air as he delivered his lines. That confidence won him the part. Initially, Fonzie was meant to be a minor character, but Winkler's portrayal made him unforgettable. One of his most famous moments, checking his hair in the mirror without actually touching it, was completely improvised. The script had called for him to comb his hair, but Winkler decided Fonzie wouldn't need to. Instead, he glanced at his reflection, nodded in approval, and walked away. That small moment became one of the most iconic gestures in television history. Fonzie's famous leather jacket almost didn't happen. ABC executives were worried it made him look like a troublemaker. However, Gary Marshall fought for it. He convinced them to allow Fonzie to wear the jacket, but only in scenes where he was near his motorcycle. That compromise changed everything, and by the second season, Fonzie's popularity skyrocketed. He became the face of Happy Days, appearing on lunchboxes, comic books, and even action figures. Winkler's performance earned him 2 Golden Globe Awards, and Fonzie became one of the most famous TV characters of all time. While Richie and his friends were the focus, Happy Days wouldn't have been the same without the Cunningham family. Marion Ross and Tom Bosley played Rich's parents, bringing warmth and humor to every episode. Ross had already impressed producers when she appeared in the Love, American-style pilot, so she was an easy choice for the role. Bosley, on the other hand, initially turned down the part. He only reconsidered after reading a heartfelt father-son scene in the script. Erin Moran, who played Rich's little sister Joni, was only 13 when the show began. Like Ross, she had already been in the pilot episode, which helped her land the role. At first, Joni was just the typical nosy younger sibling, but over time, she grew into a strong, independent young woman. Her bond with Fonzie became one of the show's highlights. He affectionately called her Shortcake and treated her like a little sister, always looking out for her. Anson Williams played Rich's best friend, Warren Potsy Weber. His road to Happy Days was unusual. On the day of his audition, his car broke down in the rain, leaving him soaking wet when he arrived. Despite that, he made a great impression and got the role. Potsy started as just another sidekick, but over time, he became a lovable, sometimes clueless character with a hidden talent for singing. Don Most, who played Ralph Malph, almost didn't take the role. He wanted to do dramatic acting, not comedy. However, Gary Marshall wasn't willing to lose him. He even played a game of basketball with Most's agent to convince him to reconsider. Eventually, Most agreed, and Ralph Malph became an essential part of the show's comedy. When Happy Days first aired as a mid-season replacement, it quickly won over audiences. Set in 1950s Milwaukee, it followed Rich's life, his family, and his adventures with his friends. His father, Howard, ran a hardware store, while his mother, Marion, held the family together with warmth and wisdom. His younger sister Joni always kept him on his toes with her sharp wit, while his best friends, Potsy and Ralph, provided plenty of comic relief. The show arrived at a time when America needed comfort. The country was dealing with political scandals and economic struggles, and Happy Days provided a much-needed escape. While critics had mixed opinions at first, viewers loved it. By the third season in 1976, Happy Days was the #1 show in America, drawing massive ratings. Music played a huge role in setting the nostalgic tone. The first season featured Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and his Comets as the theme song, but later, it was replaced by an original song called Happy Days, composed by Charles Fox with lyrics by Norman Gimbel. The show ran for 11 seasons and aired its final episode on July 19, 1984, with a total of 255 episodes. It also inspired several successful spin-offs, including Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy. Decades later, Happy Days remains a cultural icon, a show that transported audiences to a time they longed to remember. But behind the scenes, things weren't always as perfect as they seemed. When Happy Days first aired in 1974, it aimed to bring back the charm and innocence of teenage life in the 1950s. It quickly became a beloved show, but years later, some of its early episodes stirred up controversy. One of the biggest debates occurred in 2022 when a viewer in Canada filed a complaint after watching a rerun of the pilot episode on CHC HDT. The complaint was sent to the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, CBSC, arguing that the episode contained sexist themes and racially insensitive language. A particularly criticized scene involved Richie Cunningham and Mary Lou Milligan. In the episode, Mary Lou was described as having a certain reputation, and Richie followed his friend Potsy's advice on how to take advantage of that. He attempted to woo her by reading seductive passages and even tried to unhook her bra. Today, scenes like this are seen as problematic, reinforcing harmful stereotypes about relationships and consent. Another concerning moment in the episode was when Mary Lou mentioned in passing that her gym teacher had once tried to grab her sweater. Instead of addressing it as a serious issue, the show played it off as a joke, which did not sit well with modern audiences. There was also a joke in the episode where Richie and Potsy imagined an Eskimo becoming president and starting the World Series with a snowball. The CBSC later ruled that the joke was referencing Alaska's cold climate rather than indigenous people, but many still found it outdated and inappropriate. Adding to the backlash, the episode aired without any content warning, which only heightened the criticism. However, despite the complaints, the CBSC ruled that the episode did not violate broadcasting codes, arguing that it simply reflected the time period in which it was made. This decision sparked further debate. Some people felt that old shows should still be aired but with disclaimers to provide historical context. Others believed that certain outdated content had no place on modern television, regardless of when it was created. While Happy Days faced controversy over its content, there was also drama happening behind the scenes. When the show first started, Ron Howard's character, Richie Cunningham, was meant to be the main focus. However, by the second season, Henry Winkler's character, Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, had become the standout star. Fonzie was originally supposed to be a minor character, appearing in only 7 episodes per season. But due to his immense popularity, that quickly changed. By the 3rd season, executives at ABC saw an opportunity to capitalize on Winkler's success. They even considered renaming the show to Fonzie's Happy Days to reflect his growing influence. This idea did not sit well with Ron Howard. He felt like he was being pushed aside and saw the potential name change as an insult to the rest of the cast. Though he was still under contract, he made it clear that if the show went in that direction, he would consider leaving. At one point, Howard even contemplated quitting television altogether and returning to film school. The tension worsened when reporters started questioning whether Howard felt like a second-class citizen on his own show. The growing media attention only added more pressure. However, despite the behind-the-scenes drama, Howard and Winkler remained close friends. Winkler recognized what was happening and advocated for more balanced screen time. In the end, the producers decided not to rename the show, working instead to keep the entire cast involved. Despite these challenges, Happy Days continued to thrive. However, tensions resurfaced years later. In 2011, 5 cast members, Marion Ross, Anson Williams, Don Most, Erin Moran, and the estate of Tom Bosley filed a $10 million lawsuit against CBS. They claimed the network owed them money from merchandise sales featuring their images, including lunchboxes, trading cards, DVDs, and even slot machines. Their contract stated that they were entitled to 5% of net proceeds from merchandise featuring them individually and 2.5% from group merchandise. CBS, however, argued that the actors were only owed small sums, ranging between $8,000 and $59,000 each, mostly from slot machine revenue. The issue first came to light in 2008 when the cast noticed Happy Days-themed slot machines in casinos. Fans assumed the actors were earning money from them, but they weren't. Marion Ross, in particular, grew frustrated when people congratulated her on supposedly profiting from the machines. When the cast inquired about their earnings, CBS admitted they were owed some money but denied withholding millions. After failed mediation attempts, the actors decided to sue. This case was significant beyond Happy Days. It highlighted broader concerns about how studios handle merchandising royalties. Many actors sign contracts without knowing how their images will be used in the future. The lawsuit was eventually settled in 2012, with each actor receiving $65,000. Although it was far less than the $10 million they initially sought, CBS agreed to honor future merchandising deals. The case set an important precedent for actors fighting for fair compensation. Interestingly, while most of the cast struggled for fair payment, Henry Winkler was in a much different position. Because Fonzie became such a huge part of the show's success, Winkler had negotiated a separate deal that guaranteed him royalties from merchandise featuring his character. This created some tension among the cast. Don Most later commented that it was unfair, pointing out that while Winkler had been receiving payments for years, the rest of them had to fight for every penny. However, Winkler was not part of the lawsuit because his contract terms were different. Financial disparities between Winkler and his co-stars extended beyond merchandise sales. While the show was still airing, he reportedly agreed to a lower base salary in exchange for a share of the show's back-end profits. This turned out to be a smart decision, as Happy Days remained popular in syndication, ensuring he continued to earn money long after the show ended. Unfortunately, some of his co-stars weren't as lucky. Many never received residual payments, and a few, like Erin Moran, faced serious financial struggles, even losing their homes. Despite its success, not every Happy Days spin-off was well received. Joni Loves Chachi, which aired from 1982 to 1983, followed Joni Cunningham and Chachi Arcola as they pursued their music careers in Chicago. Since their romance was a big part of Happy Days, the network had high hopes for the show. However, audiences didn't connect with it, and critics felt it relied too much on nostalgia without offering anything new. Ratings quickly dropped, leading to its cancellation in its second season. Other spin-offs like Blansky's Beauties and Out of the Blue also struggled. Even more successful spin-offs like Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy eventually faced problems due to creative differences and shifting directions. Over time, fans started to see these spin-offs as attempts to cash in on Happy Days' popularity rather than meaningful extensions of its world. One of the most infamous moments in Happy Days history came in the episode Hollywood, Part 3, which aired on September 20, 1977. In it, Fonzie donned water skis and jumped over a shark while still wearing his leather jacket. At the time, the stunt was meant to be thrilling and showcase Winkler's real-life water skiing skills. However, years later, people began to see it differently. The phrase jumping the shark was coined, referring to the moment when a TV show resorts to an outlandish gimmick to stay relevant. While Happy Days continued for 6 more seasons, many fans felt the show had lost its original charm after that episode. By the early 1980s, Happy Days was losing its magic. Audience tastes were changing, and ABC moved the show to a less favorable time slot. The departure of key characters like Richie Cunningham and Ralph Malph made it even harder to maintain momentum. Despite declining ratings, loyal fans stuck around. When the series ended on May 8, 1984, the finale, Passages, provided emotional closure, including Joni and Chachi's wedding and Fonzie adopting an orphan. Tom Bosley's heartfelt farewell to the audience was a perfect send-off, marking the end of an era. Even decades later, Happy Days remains a beloved piece of television history. Thanks for watching.